Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, we're going to be talking about what it's like to live with bipolar disorder, as I am joined by author Stephen Wilson. Stephen is 75 years old. He's had to deal with being bipolar all his life. He knows the highs and lows from having his kids to having traumatic and tragic events occur in his life, which I'll let him talk about. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining me today.
Same to you, Curtis. I appreciate it.
Well, why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm 75 years old. I've been married for 51 years. I have 3 daughters and 2 granddaughters. To start my journey at its beginning is when I was 9 years old. That put it at 1958. Most of you weren't even born close to that. But when I was 9 years old, I was a normal kid, a lot of friends, good grades, played sports, everything was fine. And then one Saturday, I went to our local movie theater. At that time, they showed back-to-back movies. It's called a double feature. So at the end of the first movie, I went to the concession stand, and then I went to the Coke stand. And before I could put my money in, a guy put in a dime for my Coke. I thanked him. Then he said, "Would you do something for me here in the theater?" Which made me think he was an employee. So he led me down the hall, turned into the bathroom, and then he said, "Take down your pants." And he raped me. Now, at 9 years old in 1958, there wasn't much help from anybody. I sure didn't know of any. And I got the conclusion that somehow it was my fault. And he did a lot of things to me, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why he picked me up. So some reason I must have tipped him off that I was a good subject. At that time, I also decided never to tell anybody. And I didn't for 30 years. After that, I got my first depressive episode a couple months later. It was really bad, completely depressed. And anyone who hasn't suffered from deep, deep depression won't have a clue what I'm talking about. That lasted all through high school. And I got to tell you this, bipolar disorder comes in waves. You don't have it every day. You have it, but it doesn't have the symptoms every day. It comes and goes, meaning it could be with you for a couple of weeks, then not show up again for a month, and it keeps going like that.
Well, explain to people what bipolar disorder is in the first place.
Okay, cool. Bipolar disorder, it actually has 2 types. There's bipolar 1, and bipolar 1 is usually someone has deep depression, and then it morphs itself into a mania which is out of control. These people, when they're in the manic stage, will go out, throw money away, ruin their relationships, get kicked out of their families, spend everything they got, and eventually they'll come down and their life will be ruined. They will have pissed off all their friends and family, and it's really tragic. That is not the one that I had. I had bipolar 2 and still have it, which means deep, deep, deeper depression, the kind of depression that leads to suicidal ideations and sometimes suicide. That it also happens in waves, and you get out of that deep, deep depression sometime, and you go up into what is called hypomania, which is kind of like the level between depression and mania. You can do a lot of things that you shouldn't do, but you're not out of control. You just stupidly do them. So that's the description of bipolar mania. I mean, bipolar disorder. There is no cure. There are lots of choices for things to do to help yourself. And if a person who has bipolar disorder really works at it, follows what he needs to do, as in my case, it took 40 years, but I'm in real good shape now. Now, I'm not cured, I'm not over it, but I'm in real good shape.
Well, how many people do you figure in the U.S., both adults and youth, suffer with some sort of mental illness?
Well, I'll tell you, I know the number. The number in the United States of people who have mental illness is 60 million. 20% of the people in the United States are mentally ill. 20% of young adults are mentally ill. And in bipolar, that number is somewhere between 6 and 12 million. So it's a lot of people who are suffering from mental illness.
Well, how involved in the mental health crisis do you feel the government is in the United States?
Very little. They say they're doing a lot, but in reality, they are not. And I'll give you some examples. Um, Starkest one I can tell you is that they have set up clinics for mental health patients all over the U.S., but the clinics are overwhelmed. Millions of people try to use them. They don't have enough psychiatrists or therapists. And then, because many of the professionals are in this system, they get burnout and get the hell out of there. So if you're going to a clinic, you might go in there 1 month, come back for your next appointment, and it's a totally new guy. So you got to start over again, or woman. Then there's the fact that let's look at it this way. If a mentally ill person goes to a clinic, they're in distress, very bad, and ask for an appointment. A lot of times they can get appointments right away, but there are those times, and there are many of them, when these people in distress can't get an appointment for a couple of weeks or a month. Well, I've been there. I've been in distress. What the hell are these guys going to do? They're in distress at the time they request the appointment. Tell them they got to wait 4 weeks. They might kill themselves or start cutting. We'll get into that later, or whatever they can do to harm themselves. So that's a real problem. Then there's disability that the United States government has set up. It's not just for mentally ill people. It's available for anybody, usually in a lower income level, that qualifies to get disability help, money, and housing. Well, I won't say each, but most recipients can make up to 20-some thousand dollars a year. But here's the catch. If a patient receiving that $20,000 a year is getting better, and they want to get a job, or they do get a job to supplement that $20,000 from the government, And if they make enough money to be over the 20,000, the disability people take away his disability payments. So supposing I was making getting 20,000 from the government, I feel real good. I go out and get a job and I'm making 15,000. They'll cut the disability. So before I got the job, I was making 20. Now I'm making 5,000 less. So the government needs a lot of changes. And on top of that, there's the insurance industry. They do everything possible to not cover mental health in their policies. And on top of that, they've raised the rates so badly and cut the professionals so badly that it's almost impossible for a person making today under $80,000 or $90,000 to be able to afford a therapist or psychiatrist. So the government, the insurance companies make it so damn difficult to get help that we're sitting here in the United States today with 50% of our mental health patients able to get coverage, 50% unable to get coverage because of the insurance companies. So it is a real tragedy. It's not getting any better, but we got to keep fighting.
So tell us about the time that I was reading over your bio and you talked about how you tried to kill your dad. Tell us as much as you would like to tell us about that and why you tried to do that.
What did I try to do?
Try to kill your dad?
Oh, kill my dad.
Right.
Boy, my father and I had very little relationship. In fact, he ignored almost completely my brother, sister, and I. I had to go to work for him in 1970 because I kept getting involved in other things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a golf professional at a club, not on the tour. I screwed up that job. I screwed up every other jobs. And then I had to go back to my dad. It's the only way out. The only way I could hope I'd never get fired. And I did. But we had major differences. Besides that, I don't think he liked me. So anyway, we were out at his house, my mother's house, and we were going to cook hamburgers for a cookout. And I was doing it, and he gave me some crap about it that I wasn't smart enough to do it. There was a knife sitting on the grill, and I was about to plunge it in his gut when a thought came into my head. Call Harding Hospital, which is a mental health institution in Columbus, and go in right now. So I dropped the knife. My sister, who was a nurse, called the institution, and they ran me right down there. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened. So what came out of that was, and my dad didn't even pay attention, is that I've spent 3 weeks in the mental health institution, and it was the best thing I could ever do. I forgot about all my suicidal ideations that I'd had for months, and that probably is the best thing it ever sent me on to recovery.
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II. And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
Speaking of recovery, you work with a couple of mental health groups there in Phoenix. So first of all, tell us what mental health support groups are and tell us about the ones that you work with, and are they nationwide or are they just local?
Well, first off, before I tell anybody what I do, I'll tell you that after this, and you hear about support groups, there are hundreds around the country. They're in every state, many in big cities and small cities, and they're out there if you choose to use them. I am involved in I facilitate two mental health groups here in Phoenix, have done it for 9 years. What we do is people with mental health issues get in touch with us, and we offer the times and the type of mental health groups we have. And that way they can get in touch with me that they want to participate, and I get back to them, and then they can come to my groups. My groups are usually about 10 to 15 people per session. I do all types of mental illness for people above 18 years of age. Now, I've been doing this so damn long that I can tell you that a large majority of the people who come to my groups have been physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, mentally assaulted, bullied, and all these things that lead up to it. And those things that they suffer from screw up their lives almost forever. And what we do at my groups is we talk about them. We talk about other things just in, everything I propose is a topic, and we let everybody speak. And a lot of times they really inform all of us how they're doing and what they've been through. Equally divided between men and women. It is really tough to hear what they've gone through. Some have been trafficked, some have been kidnapped, you name it, it's happened to them. These people are the ones mostly who cannot afford help, and they can't get good health care, mental health care from the clinics. So they come to 4 or 5 groups a week, and that is their entertainment and their therapy that keeps them going.
Okay, well, tell us about your book. Tell us about why you decided to write it, and where we can get it and what listeners can expect when they read it.
Okay. My book is called Teetering on a Tightrope, My Bipolar Journey. It's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and some other ones that I don't remember what they're called. It is totally account of me chronologically in my life from 9 years old to the present. I leave out nothing. There's all kinds of disturbing things in it that if you're mentally ill, may affect you or they may not. I get down and dirty about my sexual conditions, my suicide attempt. Oh, no, I didn't attempt it, but my ideations and everything else that goes with it. My inability for my family, mostly my parents, to give me any support. My triumphs when I first got lithium, and finally up to about 2020 when I got another medication, and I've been great ever since. Still not cured, still some problems, but doing just fine.
Well, tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that the listeners need to be aware of.
Well, I'll keep doing these support groups. And through my having written the book, it has generated over 40 podcasts so far. And my message on these podcasts is always to describe what I went through and similar things with bipolar that other people can go through. But the real message is letting them learn about what can happen if you're bipolar, but more proactively letting people know that if they've got bipolar, if they stick on their track of getting better and never giving up, they can have a productive and good life, raise a family, work, and all that. But they got to work at it, and it's a long journey.
Well, throw out your contact information. You have a website or any way listeners can keep up with everything that you're up to?
Yes, I have a website. You'll have to look for it because I've had trouble getting into it lately. It's there, but the company who produced it cut me off because I paid them their money and they didn't want anything else to do with me. So you have to look for it, and it's under Stephen W. Wilson. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Just put in Stephen W. Wilson. I don't have the addresses for you.
Okay. All right. Well, close us out with some final thoughts. Maybe if there was something I forgot to touch on that you would like to talk about, or just any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Well, I mainly wanted to get across how prevalent mental illness is in this country. And by the way, that holds true all over the world. I've done podcasts with other countries, and they all say the same thing. So this is not just an America problem, it's a worldwide problem that gets very little attention. And if you have yourself or a member in your family or a close friend who's suffering from it, give them all the support you can. You can't cure them, but you can stand by them. Some of them may get very mean to you and you start to dislike them. But remember this, it's not their fault. They didn't ask for this any more than you did. So kind of have compassion for them.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Stephen W. Wilson. Be sure to check him out. Check out his book. Follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Remember, there's mental health support groups in all states. So if you need one or know somebody that need one, you can use Google to check it out. If you have any guest or suggestion topics, cjackson102 at cox.net is the place to send them. Jump on your favorite podcast app. Give us a review. Follow us. As always, thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Stephen, thank you for joining us and being so courageous to share your story.
Thank you, Curtis. I appreciate it. If you can know of any other podcasts that might like me, send my name.
Absolutely. For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.